What are the likes and the dislikes of your client? And once you kind of start to understand that and you're watching their body language as you're talking, like if they lose interest, you know. Happy Taco Tuesday morning. It's Sean back with another high ticket tune-up coming at you live from the city of Sin, Nevada, Las Vegas, where I live and represent and love awesome stuff. So hopefully you had a tremendous weekend this past weekend. You got some stuff accomplished this past week, made some sales hopefully, and you're starting off this week with a bang. Hopefully you got a lot of stuff in your pipeline just popping like a pipe bomb. And today we got a really interesting question. It came from a guy named Andrew F. And Andrew asks this. He says, "Hey, Sean, we sell SEO and PPC services. I only like to sell SEO because I know it the best, but most prospects don't seem to have the appetite for SEO. Is there any thoughts that you have?" And this is a wonderful question because it reminds me of, I was talking with Andrew and he asked this question to me, and I instantly thought of this story that I read in a Dale Carnegie book. Actually, it's like How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you've read that book, there's a little story in there, and it talks about this salesperson, how he would like jump to a different part of the sales process, the part of the process that he actually liked. And he was actually losing a bunch of sales because of it. And so like, as he was losing all these sales, what the person in the book was talking about, Dale Carnegie says, they were interviewing this salesperson, and in the conversation, it's like, "Hey, do you like fishing?" And the salesperson is like, "Yeah, I love fishing." And so then the conversation ensues, and they say, "What do you use for bait?" And they say, "Well, I use night crawlers," the salesperson said. So, "Oh, that makes sense. Why would you use night crawlers?" "Because the fish love to eat the night crawlers." It's like, okay, totally makes sense. And so a little bit later on in the story in the book, they get to this part where the salesperson says, "No, I love strawberries." And this whole conversation about strawberries starts, and really great section of this book, and it just made this point so clear for me. The question became, why would you ever go fishing with strawberries? And the salesperson looks back in the story and he says, "Absolutely not. Why would I go fishing with strawberries? That doesn't make any sense." And he got questions like, "Why not? Why wouldn't you go fishing with strawberries?" And the salesperson's answer was so profound. He says, "Because fish don't like to eat strawberries." And that, my friends, is the point to the answer to this question. It's like, look, it's your job to comprehend exactly what your likes and dislikes of your prospects are. If you don't know those things, then and you potentially like to sell SEO services, Andrew, if that's what we're talking about, but you understand that the majority of your clients can get faster results with pay-per-click advertising because the instant results come a little faster in your world, typically, then listen to them. Like if they're saying, "I don't want strawberries," like the fish, "I don't want strawberries," then don't talk about strawberries if that was your SEO case, right? Instead, start asking questions. Why do you think you need PPC advertising? Why does this even make sense? Tell me more about why do you like that idea? What's good about the theory behind that? Start to do a little bit of identification and understand and comprehend their likes and their dislikes, because when you know what they like and what they dislike versus, "Hey, I like PPC better than SEO. Why?" and have that discussion with them, guess what? Now you could take that data and you could tailor a presentation put together for them instead of selling the SEO services, which is your superpower. Here's where it gets really juicy. We start with PPC and you answer your prospects' questions, concerns, and everything else. Now, if you're selling both of these services, what I would encourage you to do is not to sell them independently, but rather to bundle them together and give your prospect like more of a holistic picture. So for example, as we start a conversation with a prospect in this space and we identify like, "Oh, they don't like SEO services." Okay, so don't go fishing with strawberries. Say, "Okay, well, tell me more about PPC. Why do you like it? Have you had experience with it? This, that, and the next thing." Also, dig into why they don't like SEO. "Oh, it takes too long." Okay, because that totally makes sense. If that's the excuse that you receive from this person, guess what? You're so upset to bundle these two things together, because in your world, you could say, "Listen, let's talk about PPC. You can figure out what they've tried, how that's worked, how much they've spent on it, how much they've been burned on it, what kind of results they haven't been getting." And you get all that information. You come back, you put together a little presentation, you go back the next time and you say, "Okay, look, you talked about all these problems with PPC. Here's how we're going to fix that with PPC. We'll get you sorted with that. Does that sound good?" "Yes, totally." Now, one other piece that I wanted to add. You mentioned the only reason you didn't like SEO was because of this like time gap. So if we started with PPC and we got you quick results like we talked about, and we're going to do that for you, that should give us enough time to actually spool up the SEO to where you can get instant traffic for life. Is that more interesting, a holistic version versus just let's solve the PPC problem? And typically, if you position it that way and you frame it that way, then those people will come back to you and say, oh man, I never even thought about that. That's really interesting. Oh, and by the way, we have this cool bundle discount if you get both of them at the same time. And this is what will happen with you and your customer. You will keep them for a longer period of time. And so if I was actually selling SEO and PPC, I would be excited because you can use that story in reverse. Say somebody likes SEO because they got burned in PPC. Well, you could go down that path, right? So it always becomes about this discovery part of the initial call and understanding like, hey, what are the likes and the dislikes of your client? And once you kind of start to understand that and you're watching their body language as you're talking, like if they lose interest, you know. I mean, you remember from what school was like, right? When you were in school and you lost interest as a student and the teacher would just call on you all the time. I used to get called on all the time. Pre-calculus class, never forget, Mr. Moore, I swear. I was sitting in there and I would always get so bored with pre-calculus because number one, I didn't understand it. Number two, I was really bad at it. And every time I would start drawing doodles on my notes, he would call on me for some question. So you know what it's like when you lose interest. You know what it looks like when someone else loses interest. So it's really important to watch and observe. That's why we suggest using Zoom for sales calls, simply because you can tell the different body language that you're watching. And if you see their eyes glaze over, or you see them move up or down, left or right, if they haven't disclosed, hey, I'm taking notes on my keyboard, you know you've probably lost them and you've talked your way off a cliff, which is not a good place. So, and again, it always comes back to this whole lesson of like, don't go fishing with strawberries. If your clients don't want to eat strawberries, you should not talk about strawberries. That's really what it comes down to, because I feel like a lot of sales pros that I've worked with in the thousands always go through this place where they're like, no, I want to tell you all about my product, my service, and it's so awesome. That's great. But again, your client might not be interested in all of that stuff. And so it just wastes a lot of time for them to hear it. Yeah, it's good to give them like a broad perspective. But at the end of the day, what really comes down to when brass tacks meets brass tacks is literally, what's the problem that they're trying to solve by speaking with you? Typically in the business world, they're not going to come speak with you unless they have some sort of problem in their atmosphere that they think you might be able to help them with. And if that's the case, then it's your job to identify that and go fishing with night crawlers instead of strawberries. Understand that they like night crawlers, and that's where we start. And so today, that is really kind of just a simple concept to think about is like, when you first get into a conversation, people say, well, what do you do? Don't let that be a trigger where you go verbally diarrhea at the mouth and spit everything at them. Rather say, oh, well, I solved this problem. Let me ask, like, what do you do? Right? And just kind of, what they call it, a reverse in professional sales. It's like, it's a softening statement and then a reverse if you wanted to get really technical, where it's like, well, actually, I solved this problem. Tell me, what is it that you do? I just literally took that whole time where I could have just shared about my company and I spun it back on them. Because guess what? People like to talk about themselves. So let them talk about themselves. It will help you get valuable information that you can then use, turn around, and put back into your sales presentations and conversations. It's not always about a presentation. It never is. It's always about understanding and comprehending the needs, the wants, and the desires of where your prospects are trying to go. And when you understand that, only then can you make a decision to say, hey, yes, my product will solve that for you. And if it doesn't solve that for them, don't worry, don't stress. You've done everything right. You did the identification part. You had the conversation with them. And literally now you know, I can refer them to person A, B, or C in my network that can solve that problem. Or, hey, like, you're not ready yet, but I see there's a couple of humps you got to jump over, but then you're going to be ready. So that should be in about 2 months. Decide on that, have a plan of action, and then be the guy that continually keeps them accountable to making sure they jump over those hoops. And then eventually they'll get to a place where, like, you know what? This Sean guy literally pays attention to me. He listens. He understands my needs. Perfect. Let's move forward. That will create more deals for you than you could ever possibly imagine. And I think that might help. So, Andrew, again, the answer here is, if you love SEO and you find yourself shooting off at the mouth about SEO services every single sales call you get into, what I would suggest is not talking about anything that you do until you truly understand what your prospect or client is looking to solve, and then think back into your arsenal of, here's my tools and my utilities that I can actually use to really serve this person at a pretty high level. Just doing that will help you to stand out against every other salesperson that is in that world selling SEO and PPC. And that's, people buy different, people buy new. Why? Because they need something innovative and fresh and authentic. And so if that's what the world's calling for right now, we should be innovative, fresh, and authentic. So with that said, I love you. I hope this high ticket tune up helped you, maybe give you a little perspective. Again, the lesson is don't go fishing with strawberries. Why not, Sean? Because fish don't like strawberries, even if you do. So have a great day. Happy Tuesday. Let me know in the comments what kind of tacos you're eating tonight. I think we might have some halibut tacos. That would be delicious. Until we talk again tomorrow, I'll see you on Hump Day. Happy Tuesday.